We are about 8 hours into the U.S. blockade of the Iranian ports. President Trump is trying to force Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz completely and to agree to U.S. conditions for a permanent ceasefire. We begin tonight with senior national correspondent Rich Edson, live on the North Lawn of the White House. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Brett. President Trump says the United States now controls access to Iran's ports through the Strait of Hormuz. And after failed negotiations this weekend, the president says the Iranians are looking to talk again.
We've been called this morning by the right people, the appropriate people, and they want to work a deal.
President Trump claimed this latest Iranian outreach just a few hours after the United States followed through on its threat to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. This morning, the president wrote, quote, "Warning, if any of these ships come anywhere close to our blockade, they will be immediately eliminated, using the same system of kill that we use against the drug dealers on boats at sea. It is quick and brutal." In response, Iran has threatened all ports of American allies in the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. For the past 6 weeks, Iran has largely halted international traffic through the strait, granting exceptions to countries considered allies and who have paid a significant toll. The president says it's now time for the U.S. to block Iranian trade.
We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen.
Tracking data show 5 vessels crossed the strait today, likely before the blockade began. 2 reversed course near the strait shortly after the start. The president says tankers are headed to the U.S. to load up with oil, and more than 120 empty tankers appear to be sailing here.
We've seen more U.S. exports of energy product go to Asia in particular. We can't take this too far, because the whole point of our energy independence is that we have enough supplies, and you don't want to divert too many of those supplies abroad.
The president says the U.S. military will work with allies to block traffic in the strait, though he says the U.S. really has no need for the help. The U.K. says it's not supporting the blockade. French President Emmanuel Macron posted about a strictly defensive mission, saying, quote, "In the coming days, together with the United Kingdom, we will organize a conference with those countries prepared to contribute alongside us to a peaceful multinational mission aimed at restoring freedom of navigation in the strait." Senior Pakistani government officials says Pakistan and other countries are pushing the United States and Iran back to the negotiating table, and that they are optimistic about the prospect of renewed discussions. Brett?
Rich Edson, live on the North Lawn. Rich, thanks. Let's talk about the Iran negotiations and maybe what went wrong in Islamabad. Joining us now, Vice President J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
What happened, and where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, Brett, I wouldn't just say that things went wrong. I also think things went right. We made a lot of progress, but we also made very clear, and I think this is part of the progress we made, what the terms where the United States could make some accommodation, what terms we were flexible on, and what things we absolutely needed to see in order for the President of the United States to feel like he was getting a good deal. And so we laid those things out. We had some good conversations. I think it was the first time that you had ever seen the Iranian government, the U.S. government meet at such a high level, maybe in the history of the current leadership of Iran. So that's, I think, a positive. And again, we did make some progress in the negotiation. The big question from here on out is whether the Iranians will have enough flexibility, whether the Iranians will accept the critical things that we need to see in order for things to get done.
Well, what are the red lines, like, for Iran, and what didn't they accept? Why are we at the place we're at now?
Yeah, so back out just a little bit, Brett. What the President of the United States has said is, number one, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So all of our red lines flow from that fundamental premise, because it is one thing for the Iranians to say that they themselves are never going to have a nuclear weapon. They are willing to say that, and that's good. But you have to, of course, verify these things. And there are 2 things in particular where the President of the United States really said we have no flexibility. We have to get to the outcome that the President said. On the first of those things, what some people call the dust, which is the enriched uranium that the Iranians currently possess, we have said that we want that to come out of their country and we would like to take possession of it. Now, why does that matter? That doesn't matter, of course, because they have access to that material now. That material was actually buried underground by Operation Midnight Hammer. But if you think about this over the long haul, the president doesn't want to leave the next president or the president after that to be worrying about this program. And so we would like to get that material out of the country completely so that the United States has control of it. That's number one. And the second thing is that, again, to this point about verification, it's one thing for the Iranians to say that they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. It's another thing for us to put in place the mechanism to ensure that's not going to happen. Part of that is, of course, to ensure that they don't have the ability to enrich uranium, which is how they got so close to a nuclear weapon before. So those are really the two things where, frankly, the Iranians, I think, did make some progress. They moved in our direction, which is why I think we would say that we had some good signs, but they didn't move far enough. And so what we decided is, you know what? Given that we don't think this current team and this current timeline is going to be able to make a deal, let them go back to Tehran. We're going to go back to Washington, and that's where we are today.
So is there a next step? Are there more talks coming? Do they happen in Pakistan, and are you leading them?
Well, it's an interesting question, Brett, and I think fundamentally it's a question that would be best put to the Iranians because the ball really is in their court. We've made clear where we're willing, again, to be accommodating, and we've made clear where we absolutely need to see the nuclear material come out of the country of Iran. Now, what's interesting, Brett, about this is that in the process of doing this negotiation, I do think that we acquired some knowledge about how the Iranians are negotiating. And this is ultimately why we left Pakistan, because what we figured out is that they were unable, I think the team that was there was unable to cut a deal. And they had to go back to Tehran, either from the supreme leader or somebody else, and actually get approval to the terms that we had set. So again, whether we have further conversations, whether we ultimately get to a deal, I really think the ball is in the Iranian court because we put a lot on the table. We actually made very clear what our red lines were. We also made clear, Brett, that we actually would be very happy. The President of the United States has said he would be very happy if Iran was treated like a normal country, if it had a normal economy, if its people were able to prosper and thrive. But in order for Iran to be a normal country economically, it's going to have to be a normal country from the perspective of not pursuing a nuclear weapon, and it's going to have to be a normal country from not pursuing terrorism. And so there really is, I think, a grand deal to be had here, but it's up to the Iranians, I think, to take the next step.
I hear you talking about the enriched uranium and the nuclear weapon and the inability for them to have one in the long term. I don't hear you mentioning fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, toll-free. Is that one of the red lines?
Well, it's one of the things we talked about, Brett, is that we need to see the Straits of Hormuz fully open. And this is, frankly, one of the things where the Iranians tried to move the goalposts during the negotiation. We made very clear that that's unacceptable. We came to the negotiation saying the United States, what we've given here is a ceasefire. We've stopped bombing the country. What we expect the Iranians to give up is a full reopening of the Straits of Hormuz. We have seen, as the president has said, some significant uptick in traffic coming through the Straits of Hormuz. That's good for the global economy. It's good for the United States of America as well. But we haven't seen that full reopening. So our expectation is that the Iranians are going to continue to make progress to opening the Straits of Hormuz. And if they don't, it's going to fundamentally change the negotiation that we have with them. You're
not surprised. I mean, the Iranians often talk about negotiations and in a different way. The Iranian foreign minister posted in intensive talks at highest level in 47 years. Iran engaged with the U.S. in good faith to end war. But when just inches away from Islamabad MOU, we encountered maximalism, shifting goalposts, and blockade. Zero lessons earned. Goodwill begets goodwill. Enmity begets enmity. That does not sound like they're heading back to the table anytime soon. Does this ceasefire continue and then the war starts again?
Well, first of all, Brett, I have to give a lot of credit to Field Marshal Munir and the Prime Minister of Pakistan, both who are incredible hosts and I think incredible statesmen and helping, mediate the conversation between us and the Iranians, again, two countries that have not really had serious discussions in a very long time. But to your point about Foreign Minister Araghchi's statement, if you see what Foreign Minister Araghchi said, yes, there's a little bit of bluster. But if you read between the lines, he himself is saying that we were just inches away from an agreement. And I think that what that suggests is the Iranians, one, they're very interested in making a deal. Two, they did move pretty close to our position over the stage of the negotiations. But one thing I'll say, Brett, is Iranians are very different negotiators. At least those Iranians were very different negotiators than we are in the United States. What I did and what Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff did is that we made very clear, look, these are the things that we're willing to give, but these are the things that we must have. We must have the enriched material out of Iran. We must have their conclusive commitment to not develop a nuclear weapon. And I think that if the Iranians are willing to meet us there, then this can be a very, very good deal for both countries. If they're not willing to meet us there, that's up to them. That's their decision. And really, the ball is very much in their court. So you ask what happens next. I think the Iranians are going to determine what happens next as the President of the United States says, we have the cards. We have the military advantage. We now have additional economic pressure that we're applying on them through the blockade that we've imposed on their oil coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. So we have a lot of cards. We have the leverage, and we're going to see what the Iranians do with that.
And so that's how the blockade works. U.S. naval ships stop Iranian-flagged vessels going to the Strait, through the Strait of Hormuz?
Not just Iranian-flagged vessels, Brett, but any vessel that we know is going to Iranian ports or has come from Iranian ports. You're probably going to see some vessels try to reflag themselves, but of course we're going to know, because we have very good intelligence, which ships are going in and which ships are coming out that are connected to Iran. But Brett, here's the very interesting thing about all this is that the only thing the Iranians have been able to do, they haven't, of course, beaten us militarily. They've had their military been decimated. They haven't been able to prosecute the case when it comes to weapons of war. What they have done is engage in this act of economic terrorism against the entire world. They basically threatened any ship that's moving through the Straits of Hormuz. Well, as the President of the United States showed, two can play at that game. And if the Iranians are going to try to engage in economic terrorism, we're going to abide by a simple principle that no Iranian ships are getting out either. We know that's a big deal to them. We know that applies additional economic leverage. And again, Brett, the president wants the Iranian people to thrive and succeed. He has had his negotiation team put on the table a serious proposal. The ball is in Iran's court. Did we make progress? Yes. But we're going to find out from the Iranians whether we can make that ultimate bit of progress that gets us to a big deal.
The president has also said he wants this to end soon as it can. It's being reported that you had real skepticism about this at the beginning and that you expressed that to the president. Is that true?
Well, Brett, you know, I give my advice to the President of the United States, and we all do, and I expect that when I give advice to the President of the United States, that it's going to be private, because the president should rely on his senior advisors without them then running to the media. What I will say, Brett, is that I 100% agree with the president on the fact that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. I've seen that just in the negotiation that we've had over the last couple of days, that these are tough negotiators, but they're fundamentally the kinds of people where them having a nuclear weapon would impose terrible costs on the entire world. If they're willing to engage in economic terrorism on the entire world, what would it mean? What leverage would they have if they had a nuclear bomb in Tehran? That's not an outcome that is acceptable to us or really should be acceptable to anybody. So I 100% support the president's goals here to keep nuclear weapons, to keep the worst weapons of war out of the hands of the Iranians.
A few more things, Mr. Vice President. You say there's progress being made here, and the trip to Pakistan was not fruitless. However, I'm not hearing the next step if the Iranians don't do the next step. You also campaigned for Viktor Orban in Hungary, and he lost that race, defeated after 16 years in power. Your thoughts about whether it was worth it to go support Viktor Orban in that race, considering he lost significantly and he's one of the only European leaders who supports Vladimir Putin?
Well, first of all, Brett, I think that Viktor Orban's a great guy who's done a very good job. I think that his legacy in Hungary is transformational, 16 years fundamentally changing that country. But one of the reasons why we decided to do that, Brett, is not because, you know, we can't read polls. We certainly knew there was a very good chance that Viktor would lose that election. We did it because he's one of the few European leaders we've seen who's been willing to stand up to the bureaucracy in Brussels that has been very, very bad for the United States. So, for example, when you see a European bureaucrat go after an American company, sometimes the only vote no the only vote to protect that American interest has been Viktor Orban. We didn't go because we expected Viktor to cruise to an election victory. We went because it was the right thing to do, to stand behind a person who had stood by us for a very long time. So this wasn't about Russia, and fundamentally it wasn't about Europe. It was about the United States and the fact that he's been a good partner to both me and the president personally, but also to the United States. I'm sad that he lost. We'll work very well, I'm sure, with the next prime minister of Hungary. But it wasn't a bad trip at all, because it's worth standing by people, even if you don't win every race.
Mr. Vice President, stand by if you would. Special report continues with the Vice President of the United States after this.
McDonald's.
Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you. I have your DoorDash order for you, Mr. President.
That's very nice. Look at this. This doesn't look staged, does it?
Special delivery at the White House. Somebody ordered some Big Macs with a side of blockade. President Trump promoting no tax on tips, flanked by an Arkansas grandma who pocketed $11,000 in tax-free tips last year. And while the president gets some delivery to the Oval, he's delivering some economic pain to Iran. We're 7 hours into Trump's naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz after JD's peace talks in Pakistan this weekend stalled. The president keeping the DoorDasher by his side as he took questions from the press.
They'd like to make a deal very badly. They will never have a nuclear weapon. We're going to get the dust back. We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. We have a blockade. They're doing no business. Do you think that men should play in women's sports?
I really don't have an opinion on that.
You don't, I'll bet you do.
No, I'm here about
Pizza.
no tax on tips.
Yeah.
Are the White House good tippers? Do you know?
Wait.
Potentially. Yes, very.
Meanwhile, the Dems' failed 2016 ticket, Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine, still whining about Trump ripping up Obama's terrible Iran nuke deal.
When we did the original talks, we had the P5+1, the original members of the Security Council plus Germany. But it was a real negotiation. So I worry that the United States is now in a very weak position vis-a-vis Iran.
I think that decision by President Trump to tear up a diplomatic deal will go down in history as one of the worst decisions in the foreign policy space ever made by an American president. If you make diplomacy impossible, you tend to make war inevitable.
This naval blockade, Dana, just getting started, already pretty effective.
So I think that it shows that, one, J.D. Vance went and he gave them a lot of time, and also he didn't drag it out. Okay, so you think about when you just hear Hillary Clinton's voice, I just remember covering that. Every week there was like another step in the negotiation, another step, and then the Iranians dragged the talks out forever. What I appreciated about this weekend is that, all right, I'll fly all the way over there. I will sit and I will listen. And I will give you our points, and we will draw some red lines, and you won't agree to them. So, okay, now we're going home. We're not going to sit here for weeks and do this over and over again. The other thing is, reportedly, I don't know this firsthand, but reportedly, J.D. Vance was not for this operation to begin with. Now he is gone. He's like, I tried, and now he can say, Mr. President, now we have to win this thing. We don't have a choice because the Strait of Hormuz is so critical. The blockade, I don't know if it will work in the long term, but it's interesting about the economic pain that Iran could feel from this. I'm curious, though, how much economic pain the Iranian regime will be able to stand, because their people, the people of Iran, have very little. And even when they were protesting, in order to try to placate them, the leadership in Iran said, we'll give you $7 a month more. And the Iranian people were like, yeah, that's not going to cut it. And they also wanted more freedoms. They were fighting for things. President Trump's help is on the way. This type of economic pain, though, is something that the actual regime might feel. Now, I'm worried about the people. You know that. The people of Iran. The regime, this one might force them to come to the table, or it will also force new bedfellows. So if they really did mine all of the Strait, and we need help in figuring out where those mines are the British going to come? Because they are actually very good at that. We'd love your help. Then you think about the Arabian partners in the area who are like, we can't have this, so we want to help the Americans and the Israelis do this. In the meantime, Israel's finishing its job as well. So overall, I believe that when you hear Tim Kaine say, well, we had a better situation under the Obama deal, except that when Kushner and Witkoff were there at the table, the Iranians said, we have enough uranium for 11 bombs.
Right.
So how good was that deal?
Right, exactly. Harold, so we sailed 2 destroyers right through the Strait. The Iranians said that they were going to bomb them. They didn't do anything about it. And now we're undertaking anti-mining operations, and the market likes it.
Good to be with you. First off, I like McDonald's. I was glad to see the president, and I eat McDonald's to my wife's chagrin, and Wendy's and Raising Cane's too, but it's another segment. I think the blockade has been a success. In the short period of time we've had it. Some have suggested that maybe we should have started with the blockade. I don't know if I agree with that. I think we needed to. The efforts to take out a lot of their military, take out a lot of their leadership has certainly softened things. I think you've made that point, Jesse, over the last several days as well. So I think where we are is a good thing. The market likes the fact that the president's trying to negotiate some settlement, some agreement here, as we saw today with the market being down early and then rising later. I do hope, and I'm sure the president knows, what the market is looking for is something probably different than he's looking for. I think if the Strait of Hormuz is open, the markets will perform perhaps in historic ways over the next few weeks. The market, I hopefully will have something to do with the president, what the vice president have made clear, which is to ensure that the Iranians do not get a nuclear weapon. I think the president is informing the country and helping the country to understand why this is so critically important. And hopefully Democrats, Republicans alike, and even some of my party who have been the most outspoken will appreciate that fact as well. For the president's right, we're going to need a bigger defense budget. We have half the ships that we had 10 years ago, 12 years ago in our military. The president's asked for $1.5 trillion for this, and I hope that the Congress, I hope they find ways in which they can cut certain things, maybe not child care, and I hope that those of us who have the means to perhaps pay a little more, will pay a little more to ensure that we have the kind of military that we need and the kind of military that is giving us the outcome we have here. But I give the president a lot of credit. I give the blockade more credit than some are giving it, particularly in my party. And I can only hope that they maintain the fortitude to ensure that they get a very, very good deal. I'm not as with them criticizing Obama as much because I think the Obama deal is a little better than some suggested. But he's in the position, President Trump, to get a much better deal today. And it's because of the blockade and because of the military operations. So
right, and the ceasefire is over in 8 days, and you're going to see the Strait opening up, hopefully really, really soon. And that creates a lot of pressure on the regime. There's still a shot at diplomacy.
There is. I think the massive issue that I have with Hillary Clinton's statements then and now and Tim Kaine's statements then and now is that they are treating negotiation with a terrorist regime and a terrorist state as normal diplomacy. And the reality is that it isn't. Everything I know, which is very little, but I learned it from Sarah Adams, who guided us in explaining that these terrorist regimes, just because they're sitting at the same table doesn't mean they have that shared interest in resolution. And we frame concessions as, oh, great, it's a step of alignment. Now we're sharing the path down together. But instead, it's actually them just trying to outlast and outmaneuver us. And what they have on their side is the time in terms of patience, that they will lay dormant for centuries until their dream is realized of absolutely annihilating us. They're not built toward compromise, they're built toward survival. And when we talk about sanctions, now I agree that obviously their entire country has imploded economically, their people are suffering, but they don't care. That's the whole point. They will never prioritize their population, they prioritize control. And every time we have relieved sanctions in the past, under Obama or under Biden, it does not lead to constraint on their part. It leads to them freaking out. It leads to them doing exactly what we should expect them to do and what we hope they don't do, which is scrambling to hurt us in all ways, shapes, and form. And so the other thing to remember is that Iran's occasional deception that we see, oh, there's still mines there, but we're not sure where they are, so you have to sail a little bit more north in our water. Deception is not occasional. It is all the time. It is what their strategy is based on. So does this mean we can't negotiate with them? No. But it means that we have to sort of portray the beast for what it is, which is a beast. This is not sitting across the table from a potential ally, and that's sad because they used to be an ally a long time ago. So these Democrats that are framing this as somehow failed or whatnot, I think see it as they thought it was some type of equal across the table instead of a vastly different type of monster. And this is also where our shared alliances in the Gulf allies and also Europe's allies need to step up to the plate because they will only survive and be well behaved with pressure from the entire globe. So we need our allies now more than ever.
And the president delivers the message to Iran next to a DoorDash delivery person. Last week it was the Easter Bunny.
Who cares about the population?
Right.
You give
Yeah,
it
exactly.
it looks like, right?
Nice fat tip.
You know what I did on this issue? I consulted other media, world media. I listened to, I got Al Jazeera on my tablet this morning. I kept Fox News on the TV, but I looked at Al Jazeera, also listened to BBC World Service last night. These are not pro-American news organizations, but they have a much more sanguine view of the blockade than the American media. It's surprising if you look at these things. I think also, I want to read this quote from Sultan Al Jaber. That's the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. He tweeted out, "The Strait of Hormuz has never been Iran's to close or restrict through navigation. The world simply cannot afford it and must not allow it." The countries of the Middle East, the oil-producing countries and the non-oil-producing countries are either positive on what Trump is doing or they are craftily neutral. But if you look at the way the world is dealing with it, it's very different from the leftists in the Democratic Party and the U.S. media.
Completely different.
Can I say something?
I think they want Trump to fail, and I think the rest of these countries want the Strait open. Go ahead.
I just want to point out that, Tom, you've really elevated the discourse on the show. You used the word sanguine and craftily in the same.
I like that. I like the term
Very
sanguine
good.
because it means
Yeah.
bloody, and I have the ruddy
Very
cheeks,
good.
so I see.
It was impressive.
It's a good word for
I
me.
think I brought it down because when you said craftily, I thought she's crafty from the Beastie Boys. My mind goes in a different
And
direction.
Emily, keep your ears open because up next, Swallow.
So as the blockade gets underway in the Strait of Hormuz, the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations posting a formal advisory to mariners notifying of restrictions, and they're saying that neutral vessels that are currently in ports that are run by Iran will be given a, quote, limited grace period to depart those ports. Meanwhile, what you're looking at right now is live marine traffic. The green dots there are cargo vessels. The red dots are oil vessels. Now, the U.S. military has started the process of clearing mines from the Strait of Hormuz as the U.S. moves to end Tehran's stranglehold on that key shipping lane. It's a big deal right now, and it could be a major move forward in the strategy to wind down this war. President Trump talking about that yesterday with Maria on Sunday Morning Futures.
You say that there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about but them, and this is world extortion. How will the United States ensure that the mines are removed in the Strait of Hormuz?
So we have minesweepers there now. We have highly sophisticated underwater minesweepers, which are the latest and the greatest. But we're also bringing in more traditional minesweepers. A lot of countries don't have minesweepers. Think of it. They had 28 mine droppers. What country has 28 mine droppers? 28 boats to drop mines. What country? They've been completely obliterated.
I want to bring in Tom Sauer, former explosive ordnance disposal officer, a mine specialist. Tom, it's great to have you on. Good morning.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
To you. Let's start with what we think we know. We think there might be a dozen mines, all right? But right now, not a single mine has been located based on the reporting that we have. What do you have?
That's right, Bill. Right now, there are reports, but it's all kind of what we say rumors, indications, and warnings. There might be about a dozen or so moored mines, right? There's many different types of mines out there. Moored mines are ones that are suspended by a cable that's resting on an anchor on the seabed floor that's floating at or usually just below the waterline. They can be contact mines, which is where basically the ship runs into one of the horns, like the traditional horns you see on, what you think of a mine would look like. But they also could be influence mines, and that is when a ship cruises right above it and it has a metal detector, a magnetometer that detects something metal that's very close to it, and then it detonates. So, and also on top of that, influence mines can be very sophisticated, where they can put a ship counter on that, where basically it'll wait until 5, 6, 7, a dozen or more ships go past it before it would detonate, which is why sweeping is something that is good and is helpful, but what's best is hunting. We always say, hunt if you can, sweep if you must. And in order to hunt for those mines, we've got some of the most sophisticated unmanned underwater vehicle technology that's led by EOD Mobile Unit 6. Many of my Navy EOD brothers and former teammates are there. They are the same unit that actually cleared mines from the Persian Gulf nearly 40 years ago during the tanker wars. And what they're using are, it looks like an underwater torpedo that cruises around, uses side scan sonar to find the mines. We've got some excellent technology, and there's even better technology that's on the way. There's companies like Ulysses that is already ready to deploy mass-produced, inexpensive mine hunting drones that can be deployed in mass to find all these mines. We think there might only be a dozen or more, but we're going to find out here pretty soon. It's going to take a few days, but we're going to get there.
Well, you're great, Tom. Let's keep talking here. What did you think of the two naval destroyers going through the Strait on Saturday? I thought it was a clever move. What did you think?
I think it was a great move, and obviously there was some risk associated with that. So it means that we've probably already been doing a little bit of searching, and we knew what's in there. So I suspect, I've got no special knowledge, but I suspect we knew that the route that they took was clear. As you know, the Iranians declared a special, hazardous area, which is probably the first reason to stand, where we're going to search for those mines.
All right, Tom, so how does it work? How long does it take when you're talking about 20 miles wide in the water?
Well, it depends on the technology you're using. If we're using the UUVs, whether it's the Mark 18 family of systems, or it could be, one of the larger ones from tech companies such as Anduril. But we're probably looking at, no matter what, we're looking at probably at least 2, 3, 4 days of searching. And then it depends whether we find something. If we find something, we'll mark it, continue searching. And then that involves using an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle robot, or possibly sending a Navy EOD diver down to go take care of that mine, which is the job that I trained for most of my entire career, and I'm insanely jealous of the guys who get to go do the deed.
Tom, thanks for coming on. We are 22 minutes into a moment we've been waiting for. We'll see how it goes. Tom Sauer, thank you. We'll call on you again.
Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joining me now to discuss this further is former CENTCON Deputy Commander Vice Admiral Robert Harward, who did this exact countermine operation against Iraq in 2003. However, Admiral, good to have you. A lot of time has passed since Iraq and now Iran. Tell us what you know, what we've learned, what you expect from a mine-clearing operation off the coast of Iran.
Well, first, it's an assessment of the threat, knowing what they have for mines. And we've been watching that for years. So we knew the numbers, we know the types, and I'm sure that was part of the initial targeting process. And as the president said, we've taken out all their abilities to deliver it. So we're really working off the threat here. I don't know if anyone's seen a mine in the water, or we verified they have mines in the water. So we're driven by the threat, and it's always plan for the worst, hope for the best. And as you've seen recently with ships transiting the Gulf, that's an indicator it's not currently mined. But you have to assume they're the underwater mines, they're tethered mines and that technique. So just as you said, we're going to use all means to identify and find those means. And those capabilities have matured significantly since we did this in 2003, which is, I assume, the last time we did countermine operations, and that was to clear the waterways to the port of Qasr in the southern tip of Iraq after we had seized their oil infrastructure. So this is a much bigger game, much broader, much more difficult, and I believe our technology has advanced substantially in those decades now.
Because you said in 2003, it was pretty hairy.
Yeah, it was very hairy. Our capabilities were very limited. It involved going on boats manning and going on each dhow and boat, where we found plenty of mines before they got them into the water. And then it was a physical search on top of the boats with small boats. And then confirmation was by moving ships, less valuable, almost ghost fleets, through those waterways to ensure they won't mine. And some of those tactics, techniques, and procedures will play here, ultimately, that passage of ships. But we'll leverage all that technology first to ensure it's safe to do that.
So not something done often by the Navy. However, that lack of experience has been compensated for with an increase in technology. Now, there is something, though, as you pointed out to me, that the Navy has a lot of experience in, and that's blockades. And the United States has now chosen, President Trump has now chosen to institute a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. What power is this going to hand to America over Iran?
Economic power. We've decimated their military, and we've illustrated we could take all your economic production and storage facilities, but that may be counterproductive. So this strategy is very sound, and I believe the appropriate approach to stop their economics, shut them down. They're not going to be able to sell oil. So you're just increasing not only the pressure on the regime, but the people of Iran, who understand how impotent their regime is and what stakes they're willing to go while they continue to suffer and hopefully influence the internal dynamics of Iran.
Right. The people of Iran will pay a price as the economy collapses. The question whether that price inspires them to stand up and force that change in Iran. Vice Admiral, thanks so much for being with us here today.
It's good to have you with us today. Here, we just saw an image of the hole that was blown in the USS Cole. Lives were lost. It was a very tragic incident and really the opening in many ways to the war on terror. There had been a couple other terrorist attacks in Saudi Arabia, Khobar Towers prior to that. What goes through your mind as you look at this effort, and do you back this idea of a naval blockade in order to reset this conflict?
Well, first thing through my mind, Martha, and thank you for having me on, is that terrorism's been with us for a long time, obviously 26 years and even going back to the Beirut barracks bombing. So when you look at it, Iran being the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, and the fact that they were also working to get a nuclear weapon. And by the way, contrary to what many Obama and Biden administration officials say, that they were enriching only as a deterrent, that's a bald-faced lie. At the end of the day, it wasn't a matter of if, but when this type of operation was going to have to take place. President Trump is doing it. What you're seeing today is just the next step. We gave the Iranians a chance to come to the negotiating table in good faith without preconditions and discuss the status of the conflict between the world and Iran. And at the end of the day, they chose what they always choose: to lie, to obfuscate, and to continue to try and murder people throughout the world. And at the end of the day, the vice president walked away from those negotiations correctly. And you're now seeing a fulfillment of the next phase in the operational plan, and that is to grab Iran by the economic throat and forbid any traffic going in or out of those ports for any economic reason, much less oil. And it is absolutely the right step.
So as a former Navy commander, obviously, if a ship tries to break through that blockade, then I would imagine that you're going to have U.S. naval forces board and seize that ship. Is that your understanding of what the procedure will be?
It most likely will be. We used to do this for years in what was called visit, board, search, and seizure for vessels coming out of Iraq after the Second Gulf War. But the bottom line is today we need to look at how we're going to apply that to Iran. Clearly, we practice that capability. We can board vessels. We can take them over in a very benign fashion without necessarily endangering other ships. And so that's what we'll want to do. It's going to be tricky if the vessels happen to be Chinese or Russian. But at the end of the day, these vessels shouldn't even try, because we are going to stop them. And the United States Navy has an obligation now to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz becomes what it should be all along: a region where you have freedom of navigation in accordance with international law, not threatened as a choke point by Iran.
So Iran, we hear the president speak a lot about the damage that has been done to Iran's military and to layers of its depth of leadership, which is quite clear. But what we're also hearing is that they have smart fast boats. About 60% of their fleet in that category still exists and certainly could harass U.S. ships in the Gulf. And you know that all too well from what you saw with al-Qaeda slamming into the side of the USS Cole years ago. So what would be your biggest concern with Iranians' small fleet and their drone capability against our ships?
I think the biggest capability, Martha, is going to be that at this point, we need to have that kind of persistent surveillance along the coastline of Iran. And if anything comes offshore, we just put out a notice to mariner. If you come off the shore in Iran, you will be declared hostile and taken under fire, whether it's the small boats or not. There's an Office of Naval Institute study, or an Office of Naval Intelligence study that was done several years ago. We know where many of these bases are. I'm sure that the intelligence with Fifth Fleet today has updated where those bases are, their capabilities, their ability to project power. They are now targets, and they should be considered as some point where we need to get this taken care of. Take those boats out.
Commander Leopold, thank you very much. Good to have you with us today. Obviously, this is a tension point and something where the president is trying to make it very clear that Iran is not going to have exclusive control over the Strait of Hormuz. Commander, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Martha.
America's NATO allies holding back as the U.S. enforces its blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.K. and France saying they'd rather step in after the fighting ends, not during it. All as President Trump calls for a hard look at the alliance.
I'm very disappointed in NATO. They didn't do that. They weren't there for us. We pay trillions of dollars for NATO, and they weren't there for us. Remember what I said. NATO was not there. Now they want to come up, but there's no real threat anymore. But NATO was not there for us.
Okay, so let's bring in Michael Oren now, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Obviously, this is a big question mark in all of this. Where do you want to see this go next? Welcome.
Good to see you, Sandra. Just apropos of the president's last remark about NATO, I don't say this with great joy, but certainly with pride. America today has one dependable military ally in the world, and that's the state of Israel. And it's an ally that's not only willing to fight, it's willing to fight as a full partner with the United States. And NATO's reaction, certainly we heard earlier about Britain's reaction to not opening the Straits of Hormuz. I think that really throws Israel's role into a great relief here, that Israel is that one great military ally for the United States. Israel today is preparing for the possibility of renewed warfare between the United States, Israel, and Iran. The question is, Iran is going to show greater flexibility in the possible next rounds of talks in Islamabad, or will Iran, as it is threatening to do, open fire on American warships trying to blockade the Straits of Hormuz? The bets here are running on Iranian aggression.
This was a post from the former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer on X earlier. He writes, a summit, an advanced plan, along with France, when the conflict ends. This is how Western Europe steps up to be useful. I'm sorry for the repeated criticisms, but this is the essence of what's wrong with our allies. Too little, too late, too often. Sounds like you agree, Ambassador.
Yeah, I agree. I'm laughing, but it's a bitter laugh. I'm sorry to say that France has said this repeatedly. It's willing to act to open the Straits of Hormuz after the war ends, and now British Prime Minister Starmer has basically said the same thing. And it's extraordinary because it's their economies that are at risk here, not America's economies. By the way, not Israel's economy. We don't get our oil through the Straits of Hormuz. So it's extraordinary dereliction and abandonment of the responsibility of sovereign countries, and certainly as allies of the United States.
This is Spain's defense minister on the blockade, saying Trump said other countries would help the blockade Iran. So far, there are no takers. Mr. Trump's proposed blockade makes no sense, Spain's defense minister says in a television interview. Since the war started, nothing makes sense. This is another episode in the downward spiral the world has been dragged into. I mean, just incredible to see that posted on the world stage in the middle of this conflict, Ambassador.
Well, that's the least of the abrogation of responsibilities by Spain toward its American allies. And Spain won't even let American military aircraft fly over its airspace. And it's extraordinary, given the fact that America has its probably largest naval base in the Mediterranean in Rota, Spain. And I don't know if the President Trump's going to make a decision about that. He has talked about cutting off trade to Spain and raising tariffs. But again, it is sending a message. It's sending a message to Europe's enemies. How can you, on one hand, stand up to Russia and Ukraine and let Iran close the Straits of Hormuz? Iran, by the way, a very close ally of Iran, and it's Iranian drones and Iranian missiles that are killing Europeans in the Ukraine. So the Europeans are not only showing weakness, they're showing tremendous moral confusion.
Yeah. And former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo over the weekend saying NATO is failing to meet the moment. Great to have you here, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us.
You're well, Senator. Thank you.
What we know is that Ali Khamenei, the now deceased supreme leader, who I'm not mourning his death, right, a very bad person, he did have a fatwa in place that said no development of nuclear weapons. The problem is his now second eldest son, Ali Khamenei, doesn't believe in that fatwa. They've lifted it, right? So we have a more hardline, more extreme leader in place now than we had 35 days ago. That does.
Democrat Congressman Jason Crow, moments ago on set. Joining me now, Iranian-American journalist and opposition activist Masih Alinejad. She has been the target of at least 3 assassination attempts by the IRGC and multiple failed kidnapping plots by the regime as well. Masih, good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
What's your reaction? He's talking about the difference between the former Khamenei and the more recent one who has taken over, who we heard is in pretty bad shape over the weekend. What do you say to that? What's your response to the congressman?
I mean, with respect to Congressman, I think he liked the first Khamenei better than the second one. But for millions of Iranians, they're the same. They're the same. Of course, the wounded regime can be more dangerous. But who says that Ali Khamenei issued a fatwa and it means that he didn't believe to achieve nuclear weapons? President Obama mentioned that many times, referring to fatwa. But for millions of Iranians, it's very, very clear that this regime cannot be trusted. When it comes to get a deal from this regime, from Islamic Republic, they're very tough. And we all warned the President Biden administration, President Obama's administration, and I even said to President Trump the same thing, that you cannot achieve anything from this regime. The only deal that you can get from this government is just if you appease them, because they want to actually guarantee the life and freedom of their own children and relatives in America. They can give up their values when it comes to actually guarantee the freedom. That's why under President Obama, when Congressman mentioned that America had a deal during President Obama, what have they achieved? Still, the same regime was great sponsor of Hamas, Houthi, in Hezbollah. They actually attacked American base in the region. They sent killers here to target American citizens. October 7 didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the architect behind October 7 was the Islamic Republic. Islamic Republic invaded Venezuela. Islamic Republic with China and Venezuela. They were the great sponsor of terrorism everywhere. So that's why I still believe that you cannot say that this Khamenei is different than this one and this one is better or worse.
And I know one of the things you've been talking about on social media quite a bit are these members of the family, of the Khamenei family as well. And you said some of them are living in Colorado?
Yes, I want the congressman to help me to kick them out. Look,
who's in Colorado from his family?
The daughter of Habibullah Khatib. And who is this guy? Who was the one involved of taking American diplomats hostage right after the Islamic Revolution. So in that time, Masoumeh Ibtikar was the spokesperson of the group of students.
This is the woman we know as Screaming Mary.
It's Screaming Mary,
Screaming
exactly.
Mary's family is living in, is it in Colorado?
They are now kicked out. Thanks to Secretary Rubio.
Yes.
Thank you to Secretary Rubio. Actually, I passed this information. I was the first person who went in front of his house in Los Angeles. He had a luxury house. And Screaming Mary's daughter-in-law, not wearing hijab in America, enjoying freedom, while Masoumeh Ibtikar herself said that hijab is Iranians' culture. And we should respect the culture. So basically, when it comes to enjoy freedom and democracy...
No, they love it.
They love it.
What's not to love?
They love it.
As long as you can crack down at home. I want to very quickly play this from Hillary Clinton, because I know that you tried with the prior administrations as well to get this message through to them. And the most, sort of frequent talking point that I'm hearing from people like Congressman Crow is, well, we had this wonderful deal. They weren't producing any enriched uranium anyway. Watch this from Hillary Clinton.
This is hard work. You don't just show up in Geneva or Islamabad, talk for a bunch of hours and go away. This is hard, disciplined effort that has to go into diplomacy to reach any result. And I don't see this administration either wanting to do it or, frankly, being capable of doing it.
So she's scoffing at these talks over the weekend, saying that's not how you do it. You have to really, hang in there for hours. They did 21 hours of talks, I think, over the weekend into the night.
Look, I have to say that this is not about left, liberal, Democrat, Republican. I don't really get it. Why Secretary Clinton, President Obama, where are you? When people in Iran were butchered, massacred, it's not about criticizing President Trump or praising him. It's about terrorism. When it comes to end terrorism, a terrorist regime, then America should be united. Is that difficult? So for me and millions of Iranians, one of the most sad story was the moment when Iranians were in the street naming President Obama. Because look, Obama in my language means he is with us. U means he, Ba means with, Ma means us. And Iranians were naming President Obama in the street. I said that to Secretary Clinton myself. And I said, where were you? So, and she said it's a big regret. President Obama said big regret after 10 years. So I think that President Trump is doing the right thing by targeting calculated strategic action against the leaders of the Islamic Republic, and he has to stick with it. I actually want to echo the voice of millions of Iranians to President Trump to not make the same mistake that President Obama did. This regime should be ended. That's how we guarantee global security.
Masih Alinejad, thank you, as always. Good to see you.
Thank you. I had more names of the Ayatollahs living here, and I want to expose them.
Good. All right. We'll look for those on social media, and we'll continue to cover the story. Thank you very much, Masih.
Thank you.
Right now, crude oil prices on the rise, but markets making a move into positive territory as the United States enforces a blockade of Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz. Let's bring in Austin Goolsbee, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Austin, great to see you in person.
Great to see you again.
It's been a minute since you've been here in D.C. So the Iranian delegation to the talks are ratcheting up the propaganda machine. Here's what Mohammad Gallup, who's the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, put out on X. Enjoy the current pump figures with the so-called blockade. Soon you'll be nostalgic for $4 to $5 a gallon gas. But the blockade affects ports in Iran, but everybody else in the Persian Gulf can still export oil or natural gas, and you can get it from Saudi Arabia on the west side. So what's the net effect of this?
Yeah, look, it's a world market, like you say, John. So what would matter is how much a blockade shut down of the whole world's production. Might not be that much, but in the short run, might have a bigger impact, than you would want it to. A lot of it just depends how long does this go. If the President Trump's actions lead them to come to the table and they negotiate some ceasefire and the tankers start coming back out of there, the overall impact might not be that lasting. If we were going to have an extended $90, $100+ a barrel of oil month after month after month, we would have to, here in the U.S., start factoring that into our calculations. And you've seen that happen to gasoline prices, and it would start spilling over. It'd first go into airlines, anybody who has to drive, and then it would probably pretty quickly start getting into food prices.
Okay, so Austin, that's if that happens, right? And welcome back to the program. So if you were to take the president at what he is saying right now, that the timeline's not changing, and the markets don't seem, you tell me, overly spooked. I mean, oil's still hovering right below $100 a barrel. The U.S. equity market's now positive. The NASDAQ, the S&P 500, you've seen us rotating the bug there. So there seems to be at least some cautious optimism there. The White House continues to explain this as short-term pain for long-term gain. Do you buy into that?
Well, the geopolitical part, I'm not sure. But what you said a couple of minutes ago, we've had dramatic non-movement or something in the market. It doesn't seem like the market
dramatic stability.
Dramatic stability. It doesn't seem like the market is freaking out.
Right.
If you look at oil futures, where people are in the market making bets, where do they think the price of oil will be 6 months from now and things like that, it looks like people still expect this to be a short-run argument, short-run conflict. And it's worth remembering the strongest thing we've had in the U.S. economy is, for all the talk about AI data centers and that, has been the U.S. consumer chugging right along, continuing their spending. As long as the consumer remains strong, I think the economic growth is going to remain strong. If this were extended, if the price of gasoline were to remain at these kind of high levels or higher for a longer period, then we would have to reevaluate what does that mean for consumer spending. Yeah. But if it goes how the market thinks it's going to go, then it would be a transitory bet.
A few weeks ago, Charles Payne was really excited that he got change back from $100 when he filled up his pickup truck. Not anymore. So European nations rely much more on oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf than we do. I think less than 2% of our oil supplies come out of it. Listen to what Keir Starmer of the UK said about all this. The ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz is deeply damaging. Getting global shipping moving is vital to ease the cost of living pressures. The UK has convened more than 40 nations who share our aim to restore freedom of navigation. This week, the UK and France will co-host a summit to advance work on a coordinated, independent, multinational plan to safeguard international shipping when the conflict ends. I mean, what about now?
Look, yeah, as you know, John, I'm not a big fan of committees. That sounds like let's form a committee on committees. But it's not wrong. You could see why countries would be stressed out if you're very dependent on the oil that's coming out of the Gulf.
So why not do something about it now?
And it's a world market, so it will affect everybody. Yeah. It sounds like the approach that several of the countries are taking is keeping their fingers crossed and hoping that everything kind of settles down.
Well, we stand on the sidelines. Yeah.
Well, Austin, you're a big thinker. I mean, you've watched this play out for weeks now, as we all have, and you see what's happening. Do you think there's something missing from the conversation?
I mean, I do think two things missing from the conversation. One is it's not like the 1970s. So when people, if you're old enough, you remember, if the price of oil goes up a lot, then it would lead us straight into a recession with stagflation. We're a lot less energy using per dollar of GDP than we were back in the 70s, and we became a major energy producer. So there is at least some part of the U.S. economy that if the prices stay up for an extended period, you're likely to see a big increase in investment in the energy production sector of the U.S. economy. The other thing, though, is don't be surprised if you start to see a souring of consumer confidence and consumer sentiment. That is often very tied to the public price of gasoline. People are driving down the street, they see how high the prices are. So I wouldn't be as surprised if you saw that happen. There has been a little bit of a breakdown of that consumer sentiment as an indicator of how people actually behave. But this is a space we got to keep an eye on because the American consumer has been the strongest thing we got going.
Well, I think that the president really surprised Iran when he did this. So we'll see, maybe they'll come back to the table. Austin, great to see you again. Thanks for coming.
Thank you,
on.
Austin.
John, Sandra, great to see you.
U.S. naval blockade in full effect for an Iranian ports situation that is going to crush their economy. Strait of Hormuz is in our control now. U.S. Central Command just warned the blockade applies to all vessel traffic, regardless of the flag of the country they're from. Any vessel entering or departing the blockaded area without authorization is subject to interception, diversion, and capture. That's a quote. And the president has said turning up the heat is the answer to the radical Islamic regime after it rejected the U.S. peace proposal over the weekend. Some key sticking points now include Iran's nuclear program. Remember, we expect them to turn over the uranium. They cannot have a weapon. And the full opening of Hormuz for oil ships to flow freely to supply countries around the globe. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. We're tracking the U.S. blockade and control over the Strait of Hormuz. What you're looking at right now is a live look of ship movement on a map that we're using to track it. Iran says it will respond to the U.S. blockade by attacking ports of all of its neighbors. So we're back to them hitting the people who at least were neutral, if not their friends. Here's President Trump.
Their military is destroyed. Their whole Navy is underwater. You know that. 158 ships are gone. Their Navy's gone. Most of their mine droppers are gone. I think Iran is in very bad shape. I think they're very desperate.
Next, Senate Intelligence Chairman Tom Cotton here.
I think the president has bent over backwards now, going back 9 years, trying to allow Iran to take very simple, very easy steps of turning over their nuclear materials, shutting down their nuclear infrastructure, stopping their support for terrorism. These are not onerous demands. These are something we expect from any civilized nation.
Right.
And the president's going to continue to try to find a way to meet those demands, but he's going to keep the military and economic pressure on Iran until they do.
And now we hear from General Jack Keane.
First of all, I think the timing is exquisite here in terms of what's actually taken place. The Iranians kind of surprised me a little bit. I think they actually miscalculated somewhat, because I think they overplayed their hand in the sense of what the Strait of Hormuz and taking control of it meant. We're in the hour of execution. Ships are coming on a channel that CENTCOM is demanding them to talk to on, and they will control their transit on that channel and tell them where to go and what to do.
We are in the hour of execution from the general, and you heard what that means for Iran. We're in control of that strait right now. Now, we do have to watch out for what the president just talked about. He mentioned, you heard him, he said that Iran is laying mines. And so if their intention is to try to blow up these ships out there, we're going to be out there mine sweeping as well. We'll get into more of that. Congressman Mike Lawler, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, will be in focus coming up. I want to first go to Fox team coverage on the showdown over the strait. Former Army Special Ops Intelligence Analyst Brett Velikovich is also on deck. And senior national correspondent Rich Edson is at the White House. Rich, we start with you.
Good morning, Harris. Well, this conflict is now in its next phase. The United States announcing a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, an attempt to shut off Iranian trade. The president just posted, quote, warning. If any of these ships come anywhere close to our blockade, they will be immediately eliminated using the same system of kill that we are using against the drug dealers on boats at sea. It is quick and brutal. The president says he is indifferent to whether Iran wants to continue to talk.
I don't care if they come back or not. If they don't come back, I'm fine. Their military is gone. Their missiles are largely depleted. The manufacturing capability for missiles and drones is largely defeated. We've been very nice. We haven't ripped down too many bridges. We did one only because they broke their word.
The president is facing opposition on his Iran operation from some conservatives, but overwhelmingly from Democrats, who are now criticizing the newly initiated blockade.
I don't understand how blockading the strait is going to somehow push the Iranians into opening it. I don't get the connection there. Asian countries right now, they're shutting down their economies one day a week.
And the president has said the U.S. military will work with allies to block traffic in the strait. The U.K. says it is not supporting that operation. French President Emmanuel Macron says, quote, in the coming days, together with the United Kingdom, we will organize a conference with those countries prepared to contribute alongside us to a peaceful multinational mission aimed at restoring freedom of navigation in the strait. Macron called it a strictly defensive mission. Harris?
Rich, thank you very much. We're getting some more new information in, and I want to go right to my first guest, Brett Velikovich, former Army Special Ops Intelligence Analyst and Fox News contributor. Great to see you today. I just want to ask you about this subject to interception, diversion, and capture. I mean, we are controlling now, our U.S. military is controlling the Strait of Hormuz. That's what Iran said it would do. So we just flipped the switch. What are your military thoughts about that operation?
Well, exactly. And that new operation is really meant to send a global message that America is the one who guarantees freedom of navigation, not Iran, not militias, not anyone else. And when that principle is challenged, we enforce it. It's no longer just talk. And when the president ordered this, blockade, it isn't a blockade in the old school sense with battleships lined up. It's a modern, layered maritime control operation led by the U.S. Navy under U.S. Central Command. You're talking destroyers, cruisers, carrier strike groups, submarines, submarines, surveillance aircraft, drones, all working together to dominate that waterway. And then when you add in minesweepers clearing Iranian mines, you've got total control of the environment, surface, subsurface, and air. And execution-wise, the mission is simple but powerful. Control who moves, how they move, and whether they move at all. The Navy's going to identify and track, and if necessary, interdict vessels attempting to pay Iran or violate sanctions. That doesn't mean firing first. It means overwhelming presence backed by the ability to act instantly. And when you look at the rules of engagement, this is going to be very disciplined, not reckless. U.S. forces will operate under very clear escalation protocols. They're going to warn, they're going to redirect, they're only going to escalate if there is a real threat or non-compliance. But let's be clear, if Iranian fast boats or proxies try to challenge the U.S. forces, they're going to be dealt with quickly and decisively.
All right. And then for Iran's part of this, they say they're going to start shooting at their neighbors' ports. That's problematic because you do have other ships out there. And even if those ships don't anticipate passing through the Strait of Hormuz, or maybe they will make it through, depending on what our military deems as proper authorization to let them go, what does that look like if it looks like war re-engages with Iran firing at its neighbors again?
I think, unfortunately, that was inevitable because Iran's been lying for so long. And look, strategically, Tehran has mistaken our strength in that region for weakness. This ceasefire we're in right now, it didn't come out of nowhere. It was forced into existence by American strength. That's the only language that the brutal regime understands. The president and the administration, they set a clear deadline the other day, backed it with real military action, and then Iran blinked. That's how deterrence is supposed to work. Not endless negotiations, not vague warnings. Clear terms backed by credible force. That's American leadership. And when the president created this ceasefire deadline the other night, look how Iran responded. They used human shields. They called civilians into the streets to form human shields around infrastructure. That's not strength. That tells me it's desperation. Strong governments are supposed to protect their people. Weak regimes hide behind them. So they're already out of real defenses.
So, Brett, we have been able to confirm, at least Iran says, that they've done some mine laying. We have to go out there and sweep that either way. Either they're bluffing or they're not. We have to make sure that whatever is in the Strait of Hormuz is safe. Quickly on that, and I want to get to the next.
Well, absolutely. I think that's one of the mysteries, is how long it's going to take to clear those mines. The fact is, this ceasefire is not the end game. It's a leverage point. The danger now is complacency. The worst thing we can do is now that we've gained this leverage and removed a lot of these mines, and we continue to work on that blockade, we can't pretend that the job is done. Now is not the time to let up. So I hope we keep going.
Yeah, well, we haven't moved our military forces anywhere. The Wall Street, they're still parked out there. The Wall Street Journal editorial board's new piece is titled "Trump Blockades the Blockaders in Iran." And here's part of that. The regime will also have to consider the possibility of U.S. airstrikes to destroy its oil export infrastructure at Karg Island. This was unlikely while U.S. policy was to keep Iran's oil flowing. Now it seems possible, especially if Trump finds the blockade too slow-moving as a policy tool. Over weeks and months of a blockade, that would strangle the regime's revenue, but the president may want results at the negotiating table sooner than that. Your thoughts on it?
We need to project strength. This may be the best opportunity in a long time we'll get to fundamentally change the trajectory of this regime. Their economy's strained, their military's degraded, their leadership's under pressure, and their strategy exposed. And so if we stay the course and continue to maximize pressure, we force a reckoning. And if I was advising the president, I'd tell him to be ready to keep going until they have no options left. Iran played this negotiation game for too long. They played it arguably better than us with prior administrations who regularly caved to their demands, but that can't happen anymore. The cost of us backing down is generational. It's bigger than all of us. The next few days and moments are going to define whether America still has the will to finish what it started. Iran's betting we're going to hesitate, that we're going to fracture internally, and history won't remember the moment you almost won. It's going to remember whether you finish a job and whether future generations and the world is safer for it. So we have to break them now, once and for all.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about those 47 to 50 years that we basically capitulated with pallets of cash from one particular president and others trying to do deals that just were not solvent. Great to see you. Thank you very much for starting us off now on all that fresh news about the Strait of Hormuz. It is open. It's been open for about an hour and 11 minutes at this point. We'll continue to watch.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.